I should have been going to people who were cleverer than me and asking their opinion. If you take the emotion out of criticism, then and start to invite it, that's how you get better. If I commit to do something and I tell you I'm going to do something, I'll do it. There is no greater piece of wealth that you can have than your own health. When it's tough, just put one foot in front of the other and it will get better. And we did that and it got better and here we are.
In this Sports and Outdoor Mentors episode, I chat with Mike Seaman, CEO and founder of Raccoon Media Group. Mike has more than 20 years of experience in the sector and has been able to combine his personal passion for sports and outdoors with his business, as Raccoon is behind many of the well-known consumer and B2B shows in the sports and outdoor sector across both the UK and the US. We talk about acquiring other shows, about being acquired, and much, much more. Before we get into the episode, I do have one favour to ask. Less than 50% of people watching or listening are subscribed. So please hit the subscribe or follow button to help us reach more people so that they can also benefit from the valuable insights leaders like Mike share. I hope you enjoy the episode. If you do, please don't forget to like and leave a comment. So Mike, 20 years experience in the events industry. In fact, slightly over, I think. But I'm interested, what drew you to the events industry initially?
Gosh, everybody asks this question and most people have the same answer in the events industry. You kind of just fall into it. When I moved down to London, I was living with some friends in a shared house and I got the first job I could get, which was selling advertising space in a magazine for a company that I didn't particularly share their values with, shall we say. Sure. And I rang the recruitment consultant after 3 weeks in that job and said, I need to do something else. I need to do something. And I went, what about event management? I don't know where that came from. I don't know where I'd heard that term before. And then I got an interview with a small company based in Putney. I turned up late for the interview because I got lost on the way there and somehow still got the job. And I loved it from the day I started. And I spent 7 years at that first company. Some of the people I work with there now work with me here at Raccoon. Okay, wow. And I think that's what happens in the events industry. It's very community led and you're either made for it or you're not. I mean, it is brutal. The hours are relentless. The pressure is intense, but the reward is phenomenal because you kind of plan this really cool party. It's not always a party. There's business is done and transactions happen, but actually it's fun. And it's you bring a community together and you engage them over a course of a couple of days and you can see the outcome of your work. And I really like that. It wasn't just relentless, the wheel turning and turning every day. You'd get every year or every 3 months or every 5 minutes in this place, you've got an event that you go to where you see your planning and your work come to life and it either works or it doesn't. Yeah,
interesting. Yeah, I can imagine that it must be a massive almost relief, once you put an event to bed, but a big high as well.
Yeah, I mean, I've been lucky that I haven't had that many lows, and most of them are really big highs, but the stress the day before, the first ever running show, so I'd left my really safe corporate job, and I decided to set up on my own. And we built the show, and all of the metrics were on track, and we had tens of thousands of people that were pre-registered to come. But for some reason, because I was on my own, I'd convinced myself in my head that no one was going to show up. And the night before, I did not go to sleep at all. I stayed up. I woke up and it was snowing. And snow is generally 10% off your audience, regardless. So I was like, brilliant, that's 10% off nothing. No one's going to come. And I couldn't look any exhibitor in the eye because it was all on me. It was my show. I walked around, I couldn't look anybody in the eye. And I was terrified. As soon as the doors were going to open, people were going to start attacking me. Because I told them to come to this thing and they paid money to support it and no one was going to come. And I passed my wife and she sort of pointed to the front of the show and said, just go and have a look. And half an hour before the doors are opened, there were a couple of thousand people in the queue. And I was just like, oh, thank God. It was like, but the relief and the high and the joy that you get from knowing that it's succeeded when you've taken that leap. I mean, that's unstoppable. There's nothing better.
Interesting. And so you mentioned there that the first show you did was running, and Raccoon you're focused on, I believe, so healthy, active and sustainable markets. Mm-hmm. So why those markets? I know you're a big runner, but is there anything else that kind of drew you to those markets?
It started from passion, and I think that's, there's that old saying, isn't there? If you can make your hobby your job, you never work a day in your life. And I knew I loved events. It's I've been doing it for 20 odd years now plus, and I've been doing it for a while, and I knew that was where my future lay. But I wanted to do events that I cared about and that I really loved. And I discovered running in my 30s, and I got really into it, and it's quite a big part of my personal identity now. And I had this idea for the running show, so I went, okay, we'll go and do that. And it worked, and it was really, really good. And then my megalomania took over, and I went, well, now I want to build a bigger business, but I don't want to add stuff that I don't care about. So we tried to pick core markets that I believed in. So I'm passionate about sustainability, I'm passionate about health and well-being, and those seemed like the logical places for us to play. And we talk about three things here, which is passion, profit and purpose. Yeah. And those are the three things that we use to assess the markets that we want to operate in. Now, as the business has grown, we're going to probably add in new markets as well, but we're not going to move into a market without people that are as passionate about it as I was about running. So it won't just stay in those three markets. Okay. Spoiler alert for what's coming in the next few years. But that's where we are for now.
Okay, great. So you hinted the fact there that you're looking to expand into other markets, and in fact, in the last 12 months or maybe a little bit longer, you've acquired a large group of shows in the US.
Yeah.
So I'm really interested, that process of acquiring a business like that, what were maybe the highs and lows of that? What were the challenges, and what did you learn from that process?
Well, so it probably started just before by doing our own deal. So over the years, we've sort of done a couple of deals where we brought investment into the business based on the successes of the shows, and we got to the turn of the year about a year ago, and I said to the board, actually, I really want to go now. So I need some investment in order to go on a significant buy and build strategy. And a lot of events businesses work like this. You bring together businesses that you think you can add some value to, and you all work together and you benefit by growing together. So we sought an exit for some of the previous directors, and we were acquired by a company called Cool Bay Capital. Now, Cool Bay is owned by a guy called Doug Emsley, who previously built a business called Tarsus, and he was employee number one at Tarsus, and Tarsus sold for $1 billion to Informa, and he's a great guy. He's somebody that I sort of kind of aspire to be like. I really want to sell for $1 billion and one day, just so I can, I can show him. But Doug, I met Doug through the industry, and he actually was already an investor in the business. In a personal capacity, but after the exit with Tarsus, he had this vision of creating Cool Bay, which was going to sort of help entrepreneurs scale up, and there was nothing like it in the events industry for that sort of scale up business. And what I liked was part of the deal was that I got to have some influence on Cool Bay as well, and so it was just a really great deal, and we went through that whole process. And when we agreed the deal, and he was one of three people that we were courting, and we eventually went with him because he and I have very shared values, and it was ultimately the best deal for the company and the future of the company. And you get that high, and you're like, yeah, we've sold, it's going to be amazing. Then you go into due diligence, and the due diligence process was quite quick for this business, and it's essentially someone combing through everything that you've ever done, asking for a document to back up everything that you've ever done since you started. And that's quite a painful process for an entrepreneur, because we had grown from a business in my shed with two mates to a business in an office. At that point, we had about 25, 30 people. And we'd done that really quickly over a sort of a 4 or 5 year period. We didn't have all the documents that we should have had, and it was quite a painful process, and actually then you sort of go, I don't know if I want to do this deal anymore. It's quite miserable, and you get deal fatigue, I think they call it. And I'm as an entrepreneur, I'm quite used to doing a deal, shaking a hand and moving on and then acting. And it's a slow process diligence. So that was rubbish. We slowed that down. And then eventually you get to the end and it comes down to 1 or 2 points, and then you're with the lawyers. And at some point you just have to move forward with trust. Yeah. And as soon as we did that, as soon as we signed the documents, the excitement came back again. Yeah. And I just, anybody who's going through a deal process, when you're in that middle bit and you've had enough, and the lawyers are telling you that you could be responsible for this if something ridiculous happens, that's only going to happen if there's a hurricane in Manchester on a Tuesday. I think you've just got to go forward with trust and remember the reasons that you said yes to the deal in the first place. Yeah. And then the day that we did the deal, I was like, okay, cool. So I've been through it now. So when we're going and acquiring other people's businesses, I can kind of talk about what I went through. And the business that you're referring to is in the USA. It was a business that was started in 1979. Wow. For people from the disability community to get together and talk about things that they can do, things that can help them with their living arrangements. Amazing set of shows. There's 7 shows across the US. And we knew the owner. We knew that he was getting to the point where he wanted a different pace of life. And so it was a relatively easy handshake deal to do. Yeah. Then it was a long drawn out process with due diligence where they didn't have all of the documents that we needed. And I was kind of like, I recognise this. Yeah. And I could see the frustration from their side. They were like, but we just want to do the deal. And I was like, I know, but let's work through it. And then we did the deal, and the moment the deal closed, everyone was happy again. Yeah. And actually, it's been a phenomenal deal for everybody. The show, we did an earn-out as part of the deal. I'm not going to disclose the details, but I can talk about that. And the earn-out was due to be hit in November, and we hit it in June. Okay. Wow. Because by taking on the show and doing a few things differently and a few things the same, we've been able to add to it, and everybody's come out happy. So it's a great deal process, a great deal story, but it wasn't smooth sailing the whole way through.
Yeah. Okay. So entrepreneurs out there, keep that paperwork.
Yes.
Don't throw things away because you think it's not important. Because one day, if you want to sell, you might need that. Good tip. So you talked there about a business that you were able to have a quick positive impact, or quicker positive impact than even you'd planned. And you've talked in the past about, let's say, 3 KPIs that you focus on, obviously revenue, profit, but also data. Mm-hmm. So I'm really interested to understand for you, what is the role that data's playing in the business for you, and how important is that actually if you compare it to the other 2, so turnover and profit? Mm-hmm. If you had to rank them, I'm interested, how would you rank those?
How do you rank them? I think it's kind of 3 points of the pyramid, and I think without any of, if you take one of them out, or if you lose focus on one of them, then the whole thing falls down. Revenue is always important, and I think is something you can't take your eye off. Same with profit. In terms of data, as an events business, we enable communities, and actually the more data we have around that, the more insight and intelligence we have about the decisions that we're making. I also think it's the value of our business. I think it's a really quantifiable metric. So we spend a lot of time and effort on data just to A, give us insight into where the business is going, and B, just it's a tool. It's the value. And ultimately, if we took everything away, that list of names of potential sponsors and partners and potential visitors, that's our show, that's our community. Yeah. And it can all be taken out and put into an Excel spreadsheet, GDPR compliant, and that's really what you own as an event. And the more data points you have within that, the more intelligent you can be. And I really believe, with the amount of data records that we now hold across the group, which is somewhere near 1 million data records now for consumers, we really can make some quite big, intelligent brand decisions with that. And honestly, we don't know how to use that properly yet, because we're an events business, we're not a data scientist business. Yeah. But I think we need to become one, because I think we hold this huge pot of consumers who are interested in being active and healthy or sustainable, and we're we're not giving that intelligence back to brands in the way that we perhaps could. So in the future, I'd quite like to see us do more with data and maybe have a data arm to our business.
Yeah, it makes sense. I think the pure kind of data in terms of the contact information, I guess the value is somehow obvious.
Yeah.
But yeah, as you said, the ability to really analyze that and draw decisions about how you operate, where you operate, with who you operate, could be really valuable.
Yeah, I mean, we ask a significant number of questions when people register for an event. So take running, for example. We know what distance they run, we know what shoes they run in, we know whether they prefer trail or road. So we can actually map trends, we can map brand adoption, we can map anything beyond that. So depending on the questions that we choose to ask. Now, the question that we have to pose to ourselves is, well, why are we collecting this and what are we going to do with it? So are we asking the right questions, and then what are we doing with the data once we've got it? I feel like we should be delivering reports back to the industry, showing where the current market is and where the future market is. And I don't think anyone else is really doing that. Right. I don't think we necessarily need to monetize that. I think that's again about being valuable to the industry. Yeah. That is something that we've looked at.
Okay. You've already used the word community once, and I know that this is a core pillar, let's say, of how you operate the business. So why is that so important for you? And you just maybe gave an example of how you could play a role within the community as the industry, but otherwise, what are you doing today from a community point of view, and how do you see that developing going forward?
So when we go back to the passion, profit and purpose piece, you start with a passion, and that's what gets an event off the ground. You've got to love the place that you play. So again, we started with running because that was my hobby, and I thought I knew what the market wanted, and I knew all of this. And then actually, as I involved more brains, I actually realised I didn't know what the market wanted, and it was collaborative. The purpose bit is what leads into community, which is, because I love it so much, I want to protect it and I want to keep it safe and open for everybody. So when you build a business that you're passionate about, you then start to go, well, how can I give back to that community to sustain the community, to mean that actually my show lives on? So we all benefit. It's kind of like a shared value model. Yeah. So in terms of what does that physically look like, we do things like we donate money to charities, we work with certain non-profits that we give space to at the show. We have grant schemes. So the running show has an elite sport grant, and we have a community grant, and they're all just available for people to apply for. And it's written in within our sort of constitution as a business that we donate a certain amount of the money that we make back into the communities that we serve. Beyond that, we have a big focus on sustainability. I'm quite passionate about sustainability, and I think when I grew up in the industry was really naive, and you would see at the end of shows just piles of waste. It was really poor. I think the industry has changed rapidly, and that is no longer the case. We want to be right at the bleeding edge of that. We want to make sure that excuse me, our shows are the most sustainable they can be. I made a big bold claim that we were going to be net zero by 2025.
I know.
And
it's in my notes.
And we're not going to make it. We would have been under the old definition, but the definition of net zero has now changed. It doesn't mean that we're not doing all the things that we said we were going to do. Sure. It just means we can't call ourselves net zero and it's all to do with the percentage of reductions that you have to make. And the big problem we have as a business is actually travel. Yeah. People travel to our shows and we don't control that. So that sits in our scope 3. And we try and encourage them to be more sustainable by driving together or taking public transport. We always pick big destinations which have good transport links and try and be quite central or centrally located in the country wherever possible. But you can't control what everybody else does. No. And ultimately, if people use a car, that has an impact. But people use their car in everyday life. But I can't make everyone drive electric cars. I can't make everyone cycle 300 miles to a show, perhaps. Yeah. and that will affect your ability to get to net zero. that is not a cop-out for us not to be sustainably minded, and we've done a really good job. We measure our carbon footprint per visitor.
Okay.
We've done a really good job over the last 3 years of really bringing that down. I think we're now at about 17 kgs per visitor, and I think we started at about 23. I don't know if those numbers are 100% accurate, but there are other reports on our website, so you can check me. But it has gone down quite significantly, and we will continue to reduce that. So just because we won't be able to say we're net zero doesn't mean that we haven't done anything. We've actually done quite a lot. And once the travel industry and the automotive industry catches up, that will probably get us to where we need to get to on net zero, but that's just sort of beyond our control at the moment.
Yeah, absolutely. And does that also include, obviously you talked about the visitors, but what about the exhibitors and the partners? So that falls within scope 3 as well for you?
Yeah, so we broke, when we tackled it, we looked at sort of 4 key categories. So what do we do as a business? And our impact is minimal here as a company. We switched to a renewable energy provider. We have one vehicle through the company which somebody uses, which is a sustainable vehicle. So we're pretty much zero in terms of our impact here. Then we looked at suppliers, exhibitors, and visitors as the other 3 categories.
Yeah.
And each of those has a specific plan underneath it as to how we're going to help them reduce. So with suppliers and exhibitors, we have a bit more control.
Yeah.
But actually those guys are also on the same journey as us, so everybody's trying to do it better. You see a lot less giveaways and plastic bits at shows these days, and I think people are really mindful of that, which is really good.
Yeah.
We got rid of all the plastic carrier bags. We used to give a plastic carrier bag and a show guide to everybody when they came in. Our show guide is now online, and we just don't give out the carrier bags anymore.
Yeah.
And people didn't like that because they thought we were cost saving. People thought we were cost saving when we took out the carpet in the aisles of the shows. But these are the things that we can do that don't make a difference to the show.
Yeah.
And carpet is a really big thing in our industry because it looks much better if you carpet the hall.
Yeah.
But that carpet is laid individually for each show, which is really unsustainable. Now, even though those carpets are recycled, there's a carbon issue there in terms of
Sure.
the travel and the energy used. So we try and use as little carpet as possible. But if you take it all out, then you can't demarc the space properly. So actually you can't sort of mark out where a stand begins and ends, which causes some problems. There's also some acoustic issues for people who are hard of hearing. This is the stuff I have to worry about.
Okay, interesting.
So these decisions are not quite as simple as people make out. And actually people will always focus on a paper straw versus a plastic straw. And actually that's not always the biggest impact that you can make. The big impacts that we've made have been taking out those aisle carpets in the middle, and actually promotion, just literally talking to visitors and saying, think how you travel, it makes a huge difference.
Yeah, sure. Yeah. So it's been more than 7 years now at Raccoon, and the business has grown rapidly within that time, and you call yourself a kind of growth focused business. So looking back, other than yourself, of course, what would be the kind of key success factors or factor if you could identify one or a few things that you think, okay, that's what has really helped us achieve that growth?
People. It's always the people. Obviously, I've worked in the industry for a while before Raccoon, so I had some good friends. I was just really lucky that they allowed me to employ them. And Addie, who helped start the business with me, she's a friend from university, who was our first sort of salesperson and is phenomenal. She's an event director here with the business now. Natalie, who was my second hire, is now an MD. She worked with me back at my first events company back in the day, and the two of those were the first building blocks. And then beyond that, now there's 42 people in Raccoon. There's not one of them that is not exceptional. Yeah. And we have quite a strict rule on that. I don't want any average people in here. I don't want any plodders. I don't want any people who just want to come in and just do their thing. I want the best of the best.
Yeah.
And I think if we hold to that, then the company will always advance. Now, those people won't stay forever because you can't always progress those people at the level that they deserve, and I think that's okay. I think we often have a fear of people moving on. I want people to come in here who are brilliant, have a really fun time like us, and if they do leave, go and say how great it was when they worked back at Raccoon, and then maybe we'll see them back again. But yeah, I 100% the people.
Okay. And so connected to that people topic, culture again is something that you've talked about a lot, and I believe even you've won awards based on the culture.
Yeah.
So how do you define what that culture looks like? Because that comes from you ultimately as the leader, and then how are you able to maintain that as the business grows?
Well, this is what keeps me awake at night, because when it starts and when it's you and a few mates in a shed, culture's pretty easy to keep a lid on. It sort of just happens. And then when we moved into our first office, we wrote down a list of things, and they were our company values, and that was the culture. And I tried to distill it into a list, and I put it up on the wall. And I thought this was going to be really inspiring and motivating, and it actually looked like a list of rules that everybody had to follow, and that very quickly got taken back down again. I think it's got to be real, and I think what we did at the start was we had a few things that we believed in: accountability based, not hours based. Some of the people that we hired here couldn't get jobs at other companies because they weren't prepared to do a 9 to 5 at an office in London. I was like, look, I don't care when you work or where you work, just do your job and we're all good. And we distilled that down into accountability based, not hours based. And I think that gave us access to a pool of talent that was probably better than we were at that point. And then you've just got to be trust based. And I think if you empower people and you allow them to make mistakes, then that sort of breeds an air of entrepreneurialism and risk-taking in a business, the controlled risk-taking, but that which is very important if you're going to grow quickly. So that was kind of where it started, and it was just kind of like, well, we'd all just knock ourselves in and go, this isn't really very Raccoon. And then it gets to the point where I'm in the business less and less, so my role has changed significantly. So I'm now primarily looking at acquisitions and launches, so I don't really sit in the day-to-day. So Joe, my COO, does that, and we're very similar in our approach and our beliefs, but we are also different, and so the culture is already different because there's a different person setting the tone, and then there's 3 MDs that work with Joe to sort of distill her vision of Raccoon down. So I think you've got those core beliefs, which I think you refuse to change, which is the list of rules that we don't have on the wall anymore, and you try and communicate that to the team below you, who then communicate it in their own terms onwards, and then just underpin that with fun. You're like, just try and make space to have fun as a business, and the rest will sort of tie in. The culture will change, especially as we buy businesses, because they have their own cultures. I think there's a desire to homogenize everything and to say, well, their culture's different, so we need to make them more Raccoon-like. And actually, I think that would be a mistake. I think each business has its own way of operating, and it's been successful in that. But I do think the core beliefs, you roll into everybody. And there's a list of sort of 10 of those, which are not on the wall.
And I'm interested, what role does your self-described leadership style as ruthlessly honest kind of play within that, and maybe does it play less? I think it's really interesting to hear you say that now with Joe, wasn't it your COO? Because Joe's then taking more of a, let's say, operational day-to-day leadership role, so her approach is naturally influencing that. But at the start, and probably it had something to do with those rules on the wall, how did that ruthless honesty kind of play, and how do you see that playing?
I just think there's a lot of time wasted on half conversations, and I really just believe the best thing to do is to be honest, and not telling someone something's good when you don't think it is. It doesn't mean that I'm right and it's actually not good, but I have an opinion and I will always share it, and I'll never give false praise. and I'll never give false criticism either. So I think people don't always like coming into my office and being told that I think they're doing something wrong or that I don't like it. But it doesn't mean I think they're wrong or they're a bad person. I just have quite a black and white open conversation about the work, which is separate to the individual. But I can have a black and white conversation about an individual as well. I just think it's really, really comfortable if you operate like that.
Yeah.
So no one's trying to work out what I'm thinking, because it's pretty obvious what I'm thinking because I've told you.
Yeah.
For me, I think that's the best way to operate. I hated it when I worked in corporates. And I was like, did they mean this or did they mean that? And then you could spend hours trying to create something that you thought your boss wanted, and they didn't want it because they meant something else, because they didn't communicate clearly. So I guess ruthless honesty is probably clear communication.
Okay.
And just being really clear about what you want. Now, I would say that I am really clear about what I want, but I'm sure there are people in this business who go, that is utter rubbish. He gives us half a thing and then, off we go. But I hopefully I'm clear in my communication, and I'm honest, and people always get a fair steer from me.
And where did that come from? Is that something that you've always had, even back in your kind of early days of your career?
Oh, I was such an annoying employee.
Really?
It was like, because I thought I knew everything, which I still do, and I would always say my opinion because I thought it was valid and it mattered, and even when it wasn't valid and it didn't matter. And I think that's kind of, I don't know where it comes from. I've just always had a belief that I know. And I think you have to be really careful with that, because you can trample other people, and actually as a CEO I have to really rein that in, because I know the answer in my head to everything and I'm often wrong, and so you have to be really careful that you give everybody else space to talk before you make your decision and give your opinion, because especially if you're quite a domineering character, as I can be. But yeah, I think in terms of the honesty, I just like open, honest communication and dialogue. I think it's just easier.
I wonder if that approach is somehow linked to your determination, which, I mean, it shows through in what you've already achieved in 7 years at Raccoon, but also I think in your passion in running, because you're an ultra runner, right? So that in itself, you have to be utterly determined to be able to, I think, even get off the line, let alone finish it. So, because I was going to ask, what role does sports or the outdoors kind of play outside of your professional life? And I guess ultra running is probably the core thing.
I think that's it. Look, I'm not the smartest person in the room. I don't know everything. I try and be kind. I think that's really important. I try and do what I think is right. I appreciate that everybody has their own steer on that, but I just always try and make sure that I can look myself in the mirror and go, yeah, I was kind, I did the right thing. But I'm also relentless. I will not stop, ever. If I commit to do something and I tell you I'm going to do something, I'll do it. As much as within my power to do it, I'll do it, and I won't back out. And that's a mindset that I kind of roll into running. I'm not built for running. I'm 6'4". I'm a little bit tubby, but I can run 100-mile races, and I do it not with my body because my body is old and broken, but I can do it with my head, and I'm okay at that. I'm pretty relentless. I think it also, running has another role for me, which is sort of calm. Like, I'm quite an always-on person, and I think when I worked at my previous company before I set this up, I was running events that were from Mexico through to Jakarta. Okay. So there was always an email to answer, there was always time on the phone, and I found it really difficult to switch off. And I don't sleep very much, so I'd often be up at like 4 a.m. working. And it got to the point where my lifestyle was quite unhealthy. I wasn't playing as well any team sport because I couldn't commit to being in a place at a time. Started running a bit to try and get rid of some of the pies that I'd consumed, and I just really liked it. And I went, okay, I want to do a good thing every year, because it's part of my personal values. And I was like, okay, every year I'm going to do a challenge to raise money for charity. Started with a marathon, and I did that, and it was really hard. And I think people underestimate how hard a marathon is. they think ultra marathons are harder, but marathons are pretty tough. And then the next time I did a marathon the year after, no one was really bothered about sponsoring me again. So like, you've done that. So it kind of started one-upmanship against myself as to what I could do. So I did a harder marathon, then I did a 50-mile ultra marathon, then I did 7 marathons in 7 days, and then I started doing 100-milers, then harder and harder 100-milers, and God knows what I'm going to do next. But I think trying to police yourself and do something that it is selfish, running like for that length of time, but quite selfless, as in you're doing it for somebody else, you're doing it just purely for a charity, is quite a good thing. But the training for those things gives me quite a lot of discipline, and when I'm up early in the morning, I can often get an hour in before the kids are awake or anything like that. And the first 40 minutes for me of any run are generally me processing what I'm going to do in the day. There's stuff that just work stuff, and actually how am I going to approach this situation? I generally scenario plan 3 scenarios for most things. Okay, if that happens, then I'm going to react like that. If that happens, I'm going to react like that. And in my head, I like to work through what could happen. It's not always 3. It might be 5 or 6. And then after 40 minutes or so, usually it's just quiet, and it's kind of like active meditation. And I think I would explode if I didn't do running. Because actually it's just a really calming moment when you're just on the trails with nature, just not really thinking about much. I'm not going particularly fast. I'm not trying to win. I'm not trying to beat anyone. I'm just sort of actively meditating.
Yeah. Amazing. That's a really interesting approach with regards to that scenario planning, that you're and that's something you're consciously thinking about, like, okay, these are the main tasks I'm going to be working on today, or the meetings that are in, the decisions that need to be made. So based on that, ABC is probably where my mind is.
Yeah, I think it's, as an entrepreneur, I think particularly in the early years, you have to learn to be flexible. I think no plan survives first contact with the enemy. If you are stuck with one plan, it's not going to work. And certainly in the early years, every plan we had changed. And actually I got quite comfortable with that, and now I try and predict where that's going to come, and so I'm not surprised when something doesn't happen the way I think it's going to happen. And actually I've kind of prepared for what I may or may not do, and what, how far would I go, what would I do if that happens. Okay, I don't know. So I just think that gives you the ability to operate quicker, and as a business that wants to grow fast, I think that's quite a good thing to be able to do.
So you mentioned you've got kids.
Yes.
And you mentioned that you're doing a lot of running every day or most days, and when you're doing events, they're long events. You've also mentioned that you're not sleeping a lot, working a lot. How do you manage to find a balance? Do you manage to find a balance? Maybe that's a better question.
I think probably the correct answer is yes, I definitely have balance. But the truthful answer is, I think other people look at me and think I don't have balance, because I'm very keen to make sure I carve out time for the kids, and that is the most important thing, way more important than the business or anything like that. And they will always be my number one priority, and I do make space for them, and I have a really good bond and relationship with them, and they're just flipping awesome. Slightly behind that, the family and friends that we've got here at Raccoon, and making sure they're okay and that the communities that we serve are okay. 17 events across 2 countries, 40 odd people in here. It's a lot to think about. And I think with the running, I prioritize that perhaps over quiet time and sleep. But the running kind of helps sort of manage the pressure.
Okay.
But every minute is busy. My personal life's quite hectic. I'm pretty bad at responding to friends. I do have a really good group of friends, but they have to organise me. I have people in the office who kind of organise me, and I often forget stuff, and people might think I was rude because I don't reply to something, or I show up late, or I've forgotten the thing, the birthday, the whatever it may be. It's just because my head is quite crowded. But I love it. I'm kind of addicted to what I'm doing, because my kids are amazing and I don't want to give up a second of the time that I have with them. And my business is something that I'm intensely proud of, and the people I work with are really inspiring, and the stuff that we do really makes a difference. Like, we bring communities together, and if we didn't exist, those events wouldn't happen, and that business wouldn't occur, those communities wouldn't meet. And I think the people that we help by bringing them together would be worse off because of it. So I kind of feel like we've got a cause, so I don't mind if I get a bit tired.
Yeah,
I think it's all right.
Yeah. So we already talked about the fact that you're running several events now in the US, and I think it's probably clear for everybody why you target the US in addition to the UK. But what have you, since you've started? The first event was the running show now in Boston, the first year, and now there's a snow show, I think, and you acquired the new business. So what's different, and what have you learnt about kind of running shows in the US versus the UK? Is there anything different?
So arrogantly, when we went out there, we thought it was exactly the same. It really isn't. There's some quite mechanical differences in terms of the way business operates over there. So a lot of the venues are quite unionised, so you can't move a box from here to here without paying something called drayage, which is where you have to hire someone to move it, and that's just cultural. That's kind of the way it operates over there, and you learn that. That's quite simple. You have to be a lot bigger in America to turn a profit. The shows have to be of a bigger scale, but the market's bigger. It's the biggest market in the world. If you can run shows successfully in the US, then you do really well. The style of the shows is different. They look and feel different, and I can't really describe that here. I think you'd have to go and see them. But actually, the underlying principles, which are putting people in a room together, facilitating commerce and facilitating community engagement, those are exactly the same. Employment laws are very different. Tax filings are different state to state. Lots of underlying boring stuff like that. But ultimately, globally, there's a desire for people to connect, and there's a real need for face-to-face. If the pandemic taught us one thing, it's that human beings need to create, they need to connect, they need to be face-to-face and together, and that's what our events do. Yeah.
And so the pandemic,
that was rubbish.
Obviously the impact for everybody we don't need to go into, but for a events business, please share. I can't even imagine.
It's the hardest time of my entire life. We'd just before the pandemic, we'd run, I think, our third national running show, and we had a couple of other shows that were about to come through. We'd won some awards. I thought I'd cracked it. I genuinely thought, I'm all right here. I'm pretty decent. I'm an entrepreneur. I've done really well. And this thing happened that came from nowhere, and we didn't really understand the impact of it. I didn't know how long it was going to go on for, and there were daily things changing that made our business illegal. We weren't allowed to meet face to face, and I'd taken money from people to facilitate an illegal gathering, and it was kind of like, well, how the heck do we do this? And I think right at the start of the pandemic, we said, well, maybe we're in the wrong game. Maybe this is never going to come back. And there were people saying that virtual events are the future now. No one's ever going to meet face to face ever again. We're all just going to meet online. That didn't work out, did it?
Thank God.
But yeah, thank God. Coupled with that, we had our kids at home. So it was homeschooling, which is very difficult. I have a newfound respect for teachers. Like, pay the teachers all the money. They're amazing. And then we had sort of, as an organisation, we were looking at each other going, well, what do we do? And it was sort of up to me, and I was kind of like, well, I'm not prepared for this because I can't predict the future because no one can. How are we going to operate? So we thought, well, okay, let's try this virtual events world. We did one of those. It was rubbish. people enjoyed it, and it was the right thing at the time. And actually, we did manage to foster a spirit of community. Let's operate. Let's stick to our core values. You know, if anybody needs their money back, give them their money back. Like, contractually, we could have held on to money and done all of that stuff because we had protections in place, but that doesn't feel very us. So if someone needs their money back, because they're small businesses, our customers are small businesses just like us, let's just give them their money back. If anybody wants to support us and keep us going and leave their money in, great. If not, it's up to them. Okay, what can we do that's positive? Well, we've got a database. Those people, a lot of people are actually running and getting outside during the pandemic, so actually there's a boom for the audience. So we started sending a newsletter every week with offers from brands, our brand partners, and we did it for free because we kind of said, actually, this will end, and when it ends, if our customers think we've been nice and we've helped them, they might support us. So we just let loads of people advertise on there for free, and that worked really well. And then we did something called the indoor relay, which is what happens when you lock me up during a pandemic and I've got nothing to do. I had a treadmill in the shed at the end of my garden, and my friend Raoul Monks, who's an ultra runner and a training provider, he rang me up and he was like, we've got to do something. I was like, okay, what can we do? Because at that point you were only allowed out for an hour a day. So he said, well, hang on, some people can't get out because their hour, they might be having to walk their dog or you know, take a child with them or whatever it may be. They might not actually be getting their exercise during that hour. So could we do something inside the confines of your house? That's where the indoor relay came up. So for a month, we ran a continuous Zoom call with a different person every hour coming onto the call and working out or running within the confines of their property for an hour. So we had people running laps around the living room, we had people on treadmills, we had people running up and down the garden, and 24 hours a day for a month we did this. And we had a team of captains who would sit online at the same time as the participant did. And I don't know why I did this. And I managed to rope in, you know, my friend Darren, who helped found Raccoon with me. He built a website and we live streamed it, and we had loads of cool people got involved. We had celebrities join it. We raised, I think, £50,000 for charity doing this, and we picked charities that were sort of becoming more needed during the pandemic. So there was a domestic violence charity because there was some horrible stories around that in the pandemic. There were some mental health charities, and just a few things that meant a lot to us. And I'm quite passionate about Birmingham Children's Hospital. We did some stuff with them. So yeah, we raised a ton of money and we did some good. And actually, there's a lot of people that I met on the indoor relay who then became ambassadors for the show and have sort of become great friends. And I finally met them in real life, I think about a year and a half later when we were all allowed out again. But so that was good. So I felt like I was being productive, but in the background of doing all of this stuff that was good and, you know, philanthropic to a degree, you know, we're running out of money. You know, what am I going to do? Because everything I've got is in the business. You know, is it the house next? Like, what do I do? And we took the decision to raise money, and that was our second round of investment, and it was uncomfortable for some of the original shareholders because they hadn't done anything wrong. They'd put money into a growing business based on a set of numbers, which it was no one's fault, but they changed. So we managed to do a deal eventually. I mean, it was horrible, but so whilst trying to do all this philanthropic nice stuff, I'm trying to raise a significant sum of money in the background through industry contacts who believe that the industry is going to come back, which is quite a hard thing because the whole media is doom and gloom at this point, saying we're never going to meet again, you're never going to leave the house. But those investors that did come in were people that actually did all right out of it in the end. So I'm confident that the outcome that we got for everybody, including the initial shareholders and the new guys that we brought in, was really, really positive. But holy hell, it was hard. It was relentless, and I thought about quitting so many times. But you just can't. There's too many people relying on me not to stop, and it is relentless. And you see the walls closing up around you, and no one's helping. Everybody thinks you're wrong. Everyone's got a better idea. Some people are blaming you, and And I think that's where the ultra running thing comes on, which is when it's tough, just put one foot in front of the other and it will get better. And we did that and it got better and here we are.
Wow. Amazing. So who are the people that have influenced you the most throughout your career?
Oh, that's a good one. I think the first would be a guy called Andrew Evans, and he was my boss when I was at Centaur, and I ran something called the National Home Improvement Show. And I was a cocky little so-and-so because I was a really, really good salesperson. In my first year in sales, I billed £1 million, and I was a bit full of myself. And I had this big deal that I was doing with a home improvement company, and it was significant. I mean, this was sort of game changing for the company, and I was most of the way there with it. And I'd written a proposal, and Andrew offered to help me, and I kind of went, sure. And I kind of went, what are you going to tell me, mate? I know everything. And I sat with him for 20 minutes and I just realised how stupid I was. Because actually this guy knew 1,000,000 times more than I did. He turned the proposal upside down, spotted about 200 things in it that I hadn't even thought about, and just made me realise that actually my self-belief, which is what had carried me to that point, was actually holding me back. And I should have been going to people who were cleverer than me and asking their opinion. And when I set up Raccoon, he was one of the guys that I brought in as a steering group. I actually, for probably a year before I launched, I went round asking all the smart people what was wrong with my business. Whereas before my approach was, look how great my business is, tell me it's great. Yeah. And actually, if you take the emotion out of criticism, then and start to invite it, that's how you get better. And that conversation with Andrew did that for me. He's also just the loveliest man, and he helped me get my job at Clarion, and has always been there. He's just a good guy. And then I think beyond that, probably obviously Doug, who is our chairman now, he's influenced me in so many ways. He's a close friend. We're sort of, I think we're probably equal parts friends and colleagues. And it's a really nice relationship. Because we're both quite honest, we can sort of have those conversations separately. Yeah. So he can tell me I'm rubbish, and I'll respect his opinion and I'll listen to it. And I'll go, well, why am I rubbish? What do I do to get better? And we can have that conversation with no emotion, and then we can go out for a 36-hour run.
Yeah, I was going to say, he's your running partner as well now.
Yeah, we ran the West Highland Way, 35 hours, it'll tell me off if I got the time wrong. We ran the West Highland Way together, which is 97 miles up in Scotland, which is where he's from. He crewed me on the 100 miler that I just did. He is genuine. What I love about Doug is, I mean, he's made a ton of money from the industry, and he should be really pretentious, and he should be one of those guys who drives around in a Rolls Royce and wears all his jewelry and stuff like that. And he's the opposite. He will blend in any social circumstance. He's very humble, and he's kind of philanthropic in his approach. He wants to do good. He's set up a foundation recently which is going to support people around similar values to what I have around getting healthy and active, and I'm going to be part of that. I'm going to be a trustee on that. He has donated so much money to charity. When he did his deal with Tarsus, one of the things that he did was he secured an investment as part of the deal into the sponsorship, which all went into the charities that we raised money for when we did the West Highland Way. So he included that as part of his big contractual negotiation with these big fancy VC people, because he generally is a good guy. Yeah. But he's no fool. I mean, he is a businessman, and the reason he sold Tarsus for $1 billion is because he's an incredibly sharp operator, but he does it in a good way. And I think that blend of being fiercely commercial and fiercely entrepreneurial, but actually still being a good person. I think the perception in the media is that you have to be one or the other, that you can't be both.
For sure.
But he's a real life walking example of the fact that just ain't true. You can be a good guy and you can still be good at business.
Yeah. I guess unfortunately which is somehow ironic, but it's often the ones that are not good that get the publicity.
Yeah. I guess they probably say more controversial stuff.
Yeah, exactly.
Which is more headline grabbing.
Exactly, and are driving around in the Rolls Royce or whatever, and interesting. Okay. What do you consider to be the most important role, the most important part of your role?
I think I'm the conscience of the business. I think too often business can become businessy, and it can be numbers led, and you can forget the humanity of like the fact that you're really just a collection of people with a shared cause. So I think my job is whilst we've got to focus on numbers and profits and revenues, obviously, because for the business to succeed, you need a strong underlying commercial. But I think I'm the heart of it. I've got to make sure that actually we don't lose our way. We don't lose that focus on the bits that are important. It'd be very easy for us to save a ton of money by stop all of our philanthropic endeavours. And so let's stop donating to the charity. Oh God, that association, that's quite expensive, the money that we pay them. Let's stop doing that. My job is to make sure that we don't do that, and that we don't lose track of who we are and why we were successful, especially as we bring in new companies. And also to stop us from trying to make everyone the same. And I think it was one of the reasons, and we've learned a lot from Doug and his story with Tarsus, is that he collected entrepreneurs and put them together, but he didn't try and homogenise everything. He didn't try and make everybody on the same system and to work in the same way, because what he understood is that you bought those businesses because they had something exciting in them, and they were entrepreneurial and they were different. So why try and make them the same? I think sort of perhaps avoiding that big company thinking.
Yeah.
That could potentially undermine what makes you great in the first place.
Makes a lot of sense. So what are the best and worst things about working in the events industry?
The best things about the events industry, I would say, are travel, opportunity, and fun. So you get to go to cool places. You often don't get to see them, so it's a good and a bad thing. Yeah. So I remember I went to Jakarta so many times, and I've never explored Indonesia. I've literally flown in and seen a hotel and then flown back out again. So opportunity is great. Like, you can progress really fast. In my first company, I got promoted every year in the first 7 years of my career, because if you're ambitious enough and you're driven enough and you do a good job, then you can progress really, really quickly. It's very entrepreneurial, it's very fast moving, and actually it's cool. Like, events are really cool. The bad bits, it's incredibly stressful, it's incredibly pressured, and I think that's just the trade-off. Like, you can probably get paid more in a different sector and have a lot less stress. You'll have a lot less fun, and you'll have a lot more sleep, because it's definitely a work hard, play hard industry. If you're so inclined, there's always an opportunity to stay up late and get up early, which I have learnt to my cost on many an occasion, and I still think I can stay up late and get up early. I can't do it so well anymore.
No.
But I think it is generally, it's probably the most fun industry that exists. And what we don't talk about is that the UK is actually the leading events industry in the world. We have some of the biggest events industries in the world domiciled here. I think 3 of the top 5. It's a huge driver of economic impact on the economy. It's easy for me to say. It's a huge driver for the economy. Delivers 11 billion of economic impact, the events industry in the UK, and no one at government talks about it.
Yeah.
We have just got an APPG set up, which I think was reinstated just after COVID. And the lady who was chair of that group has lost her seat at the recent election. So what's going to happen to that, I don't know. Why no one in government takes notice of the events industry, I do not know, because it is probably one of the few sectors where we're a market leader, and it's a job creator. It's something that's fast growing and just needs a bit of attention.
So looking back, what's your biggest learning that's come from a mistake that you've made?
Biggest learning that's come. I think I'll probably go back to my sales proposal that I talked about earlier with Andrew, where I was convinced that I knew what was the right course of action was, and I was incredibly confident in my own ability. And I was about to go out with something that was half copped, and I was about to lose the biggest deal of my career, and I didn't even know it. And then I accidentally sort of got forced into a conversation with this guy who explained to me why I didn't quite know everything. So my learning from that is bring in smart people and listen. I am definitely not the smartest person in this business. There's a lot of people in here who are cleverer than me. My job is to create the go forward, and I'm quite good at making decisions, but what I've learned is that I need to listen to the people around me, get their input because they're generally a lot wiser than me, and then take the best idea and then pretend it was mine.
Good tip. Have you ever worked with a coach, an external coach or a mentor?
Yeah, when I was at Clarion, I had a leadership coach for 2 years, and it was incredibly useful. I think it helped rough out the edges a little bit, but also it was kind of like just a good person to talk to. You know, somebody who will just be completely objective because they're not in the doing. And I was a bit worried that it was going to be somebody who was going to tell me what to do and make me better and try and stop me from being me. And actually, it was quite the opposite. It's just quite an open discussion generally. We met quite a few times. I think we met every couple of weeks. And he was great. He was just really phenomenal. It was just an open chat. And by that point, I was a bit more welcoming of not criticism, but feedback. And a coach will never criticize you, but they do just encourage you to think about things differently. And how would you approach that situation differently? And none of it's game-changing or world-exploding. It's not rocket science. But anyone considering using a coach, I'd say do it. It can't make you any worse, and it can definitely make you better.
So, if you could give future leaders of the sports and the outdoor industry 3 pieces of advice for having a successful career, what would you say?
Immerse yourself in whatever industry you want to be in. I think there's no shortcuts in this industry. It is a passion-led industry, and I think if you're authentic, then that gets you a long way. And if you're not authentic, I think people smell that quite quickly. I think differently would be my second piece of advice. I think there is a lot of this is what we've always done. I think the industry has a lot of pressures. Some factors external, not the industry's fault, and some where we actually have been slightly slow to innovate. I think welcome change, and I think embrace it. So try and think differently. Are you doing what you've always done? And what are you going to do to change that? And I think probably the third piece of advice would be do it. I mean, this is the best industry to work in. There is no greater piece of wealth that you can have than your own health. Getting active outdoors is so important, mentally, physically. It is what we were meant to do, and we're in an industry that inspires people to do that. It's the most important thing that we have going on. Look at the obesity epidemic. Yeah. We can solve that, and we're part of the solution. So yeah, your job is important. It really is. It's not selling hiking poles or skis. That's not what you're doing. You're actually helping people be more active, and you're helping people live better lives.
Oh, it's so tempting to finish there because that was a great.
I've got a bit crusadery.
A great soundbite, no, but it's so true. So I do have one more question though, and maybe it will be the same answer. Let's see. So, if today was the last day of your career, if you were hanging up your keys to the Raccoon door, what would your message be to your team?
I've thought about this because I think succession planning is quite important, and I've actually managed to take myself out of the day-to-day running of the business pretty much entirely now. I think my message would be, go for it. You're good enough. They definitely are good enough. And don't be afraid. I think there's too many decisions in business made out of fear, and you don't need the fear. You can do it. You're good enough.
Brilliant. Well, thank you very much, Mike, for your time and
Thanks for having
sharing
me.
such great insights. I think there's a lot of really valuable insights there for people, with a lot of good nuggets to take on board and learn from. So yeah, thanks for your time. I really appreciate it.
Thanks for having me.
No worries. I hope you enjoyed the episode. If you did, please like, subscribe, and leave a comment. Thanks for your support, and see you soon for the next Sports and Outdoor Mentors episode.